Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the April 2022 listening sessions for the California Truth and Healing Council. We have general listening sessions this week, with the first having taken place yesterday from 1 to 2:30, and then the second one is today from 6 to 7:30. We don't have a business meeting on calendar, and that's because we now no longer have the waivers for open meetings. So we're working to see if the council would like to schedule a separate business meeting, or if they'd like to just have that be part of their regular quarterly meetings, and whether that will be just something that they do within the context of those, or whether they'll have some business meetings in between to take care of other outstanding actions that need to get done. My name is Christina Snyder, and I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians and the tribal advisor to Governor Gavin Newsom. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the land I'm joining you from is the ancestral homelands of the Patwin peoples. I'm now going to firstly briefly go through some of the logistics for today's session. First, we're recording this session, and it will be available for public participation via Zoom. We have had some Zoom bombers every now and then, so we are watching out for it, and we will try as quickly as we can to lock down on that, but just up in case you see anything shady, we'll try our best to kind of get ahead of that. The recording and summary notes will be available on the CTHC meeting page and blog when they're ready. For those interested in following the council, ongoing updates, including listening session recordings and the listening session summary documents, are available at the California Truth and Healing Council updates blog at catruthandhealing.com. You can also get updates for events by following the Governor's Office of the Tribal Advisor on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And for those of you that are new to this process, I do encourage you to go take a look at some of the documents that we have already available from the several years of listening sessions that we have had. And I do want to that we are in constant engagement with tribal communities, and those conversations are not necessarily reflected in those notes or in these meetings because they're the subject matter is confidential and protected under state law. Additional details, including meeting dates, agendas, and background information, are available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. If you haven't already done so, we'd appreciate if you could update your name and let us know who you are. And you can also, if you don't want to introduce yourself to the group when we get to that point in time, you can also introduce yourself in the chat and let us know who you are and where you're from, and if there's anything you'd like to bring to today's discussion. And as we get to the discussion portion of today's session, we'd appreciate if those who are comfortable could get on camera. We're going to first start with brief introductions of those of you who have joined us, and then as always, we'll dive into a quick overview to get everyone up to speed on the recent updates of the council, and then we'll go into the listening and discussion portion of today's convening. If you'd like to speak at any point in time, we ask that you raise your hand. We'll call on you. And if you're using the Zoom app, you should be able to raise your hand using the app controls, but you can also use Alt-Y in Windows and Option Y on Mac to raise and lower your hand. If you've dialed in, you should be able to raise your hand by pressing star. You can also email written comments to info@catruthandhealing.com at your convenience. Now, before we begin, I'd like to remind participants that all of our council members, council staff, and many of you are members of the population collective healing. So I ask that you engage with the council, our office, and each other with respect and with your whole heart in a healing mindset. Many of us doing this work are navigating systems that were not built for us to make change that was never contemplated. This in itself takes an amount of patience and emotional integrity, and we're all doing our best to make strides in these spaces. So thank you again for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to our council members first who are present before we introduce staff. Councilmember Harper.
Yes, open toish, everyone. I'm very interested in hearing what people would like to share this evening, and I just want to thank everyone for participating. Kamolish.
Thank you. And we have Councilmember Lucas as well. Councilmember Lucas, have you dialed in? Okay, I can't hear her. So it may be that there may be a mute issue. but I think she's dialed in, so I think she's listening. And then I don't see any other council members present, but Loretta, would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Loretta Miranda. I am Serrano Cupeño, a descendant of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians, and I currently serve as Chief Deputy Tribal Advisor and Special Counsel for the Tribal Advisor's Office, and happy to have you all here tonight.
Great. And we also have Michael Park on from our office who can help connect you with us if you would like to talk to us outside the context of this meeting, or if you would like to set up a time to kind of learn just more about the council and how you can engage and help in this process. If anyone else would like to introduce themselves at this time, please feel free to unmute your line, or if you have anything you'd like to say to the group before we get into the updates, please feel free to do so at this time. Well, I saw a physical hand raise from Lena first, I think, so we'll go with that.
Ayuki Dilaha. I'm Lena Ballman. I live in Crescent City. I am from inland. I'm Kuduk Indian, but I'm married to Lauren Ballman, who is the Tolowa linguist and spiritual leader of the Tolowa. So I have my feet in both toes in both tribes. I do medicine for the brush dance at Kudamine. Been doing it for probably over 20 years. Very involved with ceremony. We brought ceremony back for the Tolowa, and we continue to support and bring back Kuduk ceremonies. We're getting ready to do my granddaughter's flower dance for Kuduk, and then she'll have her Tolowa flower dance later this summer. So busy passing on the traditions and culture to the next generation. Glad to be here to support and learn what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. We love to hear that, and also potentially would love to hear about any interest in joining an elders subcommittee, but we'll put that there for a second. And Ramirez.
Who'd you say? Did you say
You.
mine? Okay, I thought I heard Lynn, and I'm saying I'm not Lynn.
I said chairwoman, I think.
Oh, I know what it didn't come through on my side, so maybe it was just computer stuff, you know.
Loretta says my internet's choppy right now, so I apologize.
Okay. Hello. I'm Louise Miranda Ramirez, named Tribal Chairwoman for Launi Costano and Nestland Nation, and we are the people of Monterey County. Thank you. Glad to see you all.
Thank you and welcome. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves to the group at this time?
It looks like Christina may be frozen. Oh no, I see you moving
Can
now.
you see me now? I
Yeah.
thought everyone else froze and it's my fault, so I apologize for my internet. Any other introductions at this time?
And also please feel free to use the chat if you're more comfortable introducing yourself that way.
Okay. We will also have, oh, Ken, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Ken Woodrow, Tribal Chair of Wiksasha Indian Tribe. I didn't know I did that.
Well, welcome.
Welcome.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and get started with the updates. And if folks have comments or questions at any point in time, please feel free to share them in the chat. And we'll go ahead and get started.
All right, we can see it on our end.
Good. Okay. So As we get started, we'll go over some of the council meeting principles that the council has adopted in order to ensure that we have a space where participants feel welcome, respected, and able to speak comfortably. So we'll uphold the following principles in all meetings of the council, including this one. We ask that all participants work toward sharing in their stewardship. If you are a participant in a convening with the council, we ask that you engage in the work of the council and with others in an open and respectful way. We ask that you engage in behaviors that will make others feel welcome. We ask that you take care of your emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical well-being and seek support as you need it. With this in mind, I know that people get frustrated about either the pace of the work or some of the challenges that we have. And I just, before you engage, that you take a deep breath and that we come back to the table and center ourselves in a way that has that mutual respect and understanding. So what does respectful engagement mean? Affirm the person, critique the ideas, provide feedback constructively and with the intent for mutual growth and healing. Welcome feedback and challenges to your opinions. Avoid contributing to assumptions or generalizations about tribes, tribal communities, or other groups. Do not ask individuals to speak for a perceived group, speak only for yourself. Offer participants the benefit of the doubt. Spirited discussions are expected on these topics. See this as a sign that folks are engaged and care, and remember to be respectful as you speak, read, and listen. Honor confidentiality. Do not share others' experiences or information without permission. And this is really specifically for this work in the context of when people are sharing their stories, their experiences, the stories of their family, of their tribe, unless you have the express consent of those people to share those stories in another context, we ask that you don't go out and share those experiences with others. Assume that you have relative privileges in both explicit and implicit biases. Know that others may or may not have had similar opportunities, experiences, and background as you. Recognize that their contributions are equally valuable. For those from dominant identity groups, refrain from contributions that prioritize dominant experience over those who have been marginalized. And welcoming behavior. Make behavioral adjustments for virtual communication. If you wouldn't say something to someone's face, please refrain from saying it virtually by voice or text. Know that use of strong language, capital letters, and exclamation marks can be easily misinterpreted online as unwelcome yelling or aggressive behavior. Remember that tone does not carry via text. People might not realize that you're joking or being sarcastic. And leave space for others to engage and express comments and ideas if you've spoken recently by letting people finish their thoughts before adding new ones. Personal well-being. Take steps to ensure your physical comfort. Some examples in virtual meetings include shifting your sitting and standing position often, taking a purposeful deep breath regularly, raising your eyes to look beyond the screen or sit back from the computer when possible to relieve eye strain. Keep a glass of water nearby and take sips throughout sessions. And please consider physically leaving the computer during breaks. Participate as you're able to and adjust your presence as needed, whether that's turning off your video or stepping away entirely. It's not expected that all participants will or should be present for the entirety of the council's work. We know and support that you'll take time to eat, take care of your families and pets, but be aware that virtual convenings will be recorded and in public. Set up supportive resources such as food, water, ergonomics, and privacy while offloading responsibilities if possible in advance of convenings. Plan for breaks and stick to them. Seek support from your own networks or from provided resources as needed, and please alert council staff to any concerns as soon as possible. We understand that participants bring their entire selves and histories with them to the council, and that topics explored during the course of this work may stimulate emotions and thoughts that would benefit from accompaniment and support. Although trauma responses can come from a variety of contexts and sources, the council understands that those who have experienced disparate treatment due to their native identities may specifically want to seek assistance related to historical trauma and related issues discussed with the council. Council staff will be providing supportive resources for participants to be available for the duration of the council's work. So for today, we're going to have an overview of the council and its charge as we do in all meetings. We'll go through the hybrid quarterly council meetings and go through kind of a readout from the last one. We'll then talk about the subcommittees and where they're all at. And then we'll talk about the idea of issue area task forces, which is again, a proposal that we are thinking about based on our conversations with tribes and with the community as well, to think about how we can drive toward a deliverable oriented process that is focused on broad-based sweeping change throughout the state. We'll then go into listening and discussion. And as mentioned earlier, if you have a question throughout, or if you have any comments, we're happy to read those in or pause while we have a conversation. So what is the Truth in Healing Council? The Truth in Healing Council is a California Native American-led initiative that aims to clarify the historical record of the relationship between the state and California Native Americans by bearing witness to, recording, examining existing documentation of, and receiving California Native narratives in the spirit of truth and healing. The council is led and convened by our office and governed by a governing council of California Native American leaders, and may include additional non-voting representatives from California Native American tribes, relevant state and local agencies, and other relevant non-governmental stakeholders. The council will submit a final report of findings to the governor's office by 2025. The report should reflect a holistic understanding of the historical relationship between California Native Americans and the state, and can also make remedial recommendations and consider how to prevent similar depredations and policies in the future. The remedial recommendations will be considered and adopted or developed by the council in real time. And part of that is that proposed task force structure where we have issue area experts and groups that have been working in those spaces, think about, develop, and really hone those recommendations for consideration by the deliverable subcommittee. And those recommendations can be to improve policy, legislation, or funding for California Native people. The council welcomes and encourages all available methods for public participation, and participants are encouraged to attend and observe all meetings of the council, submit written statements to the council, make oral statements and testimony to the council, participate in interactive dialogues, panel discussions, and informal meetings, organize and host affiliate events on issues relevant to the work of the council, and join the work of the subcommittees and then also the task forces as they are established. If you're a California Native American tribe, we are seeking to begin initial consultation meetings, and we have met with several tribes already. And you can reach out to us if your tribe is ready to meet. And really what these consultation meetings are, they're not your final submission to the council where you have everything ready and everything that you want to do ready. We're really just having an initial touch base to see what your needs are and what you'd be interested in utilizing from the council, or whether you might not even be interested in engaging in this process at all. Or if you've already done a process like this that the council could wrap into its work or could learn from or highlight in some way. We're also seeking to learn more about what your limitations are in engaging in this process so that we can better inform the California Tribal, California Truth and Healing Fund process and make sure that those priorities are adequately included. We're flexible about the method and mode of meetings, and I am starting to travel a bit more. So I have been meeting with several tribes in their locations, but also want to be mindful that we are still dealing with some public health issues across the country. And so want to make sure that if people are not comfortable with meeting in person, then we don't have to do that. And we can meet via Zoom. We can have an initial call. We're very much flexible. Meetings will be recorded if wants them to. And so really it's at the initiative of the tribe whether you would like to record or not. And tribes can share as much or as little as they're comfortable with. Outside of tribal consultation, the governing council and the tribal advisor's office are available to meet with Native American individuals, organizations, and groups at their request as well. The council is currently seeking to conduct interviews for Native oral histories, particularly from elders, and can provide you with assistance in providing submissions. We're in the procurement process still for that equipment, but really what we're looking at is we can either come and conduct those oral history interviews, or we are putting together kits in the event that you would like to take it to your elders council at your tribe or your elders program, or just have it within the tribal office for, a period or so while people come in and conduct their oral histories. We're pretty flexible, and we'll let you know when we have that equipment. But you can also just contact us and we can talk about what a submission would look like and what kind of questions would be good to ask. And if you have oral histories that are already ready and available that you'd like to submit to this process, what we're looking for is the consent of the tribe or of the individuals for that to be used within the context of this process, so that we're not taking existing materials without people's knowledge or. For 2022 council meetings, because of the expiration in the waivers of public meeting rules, which have some requirements for in-person, we have shifted from the regular business meetings, which are more about kind of getting things done, getting the initial documents done, getting the structure done, getting all of that out of the way. And we're shifting toward the regular council meetings, which is a few days of both talking and listening circle, some field trips, and then also the regular hearing. What we'll probably do is tack on the business meeting and onto those quarterly meetings, as well as any regional hearings that happen in the intervening time. And so those have started in March. The first one was on March 17th and 18th in Sacramento. And as I mentioned, the council will meet as needed to conduct business, but those will be done again in accordance with open meeting rules and will be done kind of at the pleasure of the council. So for the March hybrid meeting, I put up the agenda that it was structured around so that we can kind of debrief, but also this is kind of the structure we're looking at for the quarterly meetings in general. And so if you have a site or you have a group of tribes that is ready to have a meeting and you have an idea about how you'd like to structure it that looks a little bit like this, we are happy to have that conversation so that we can start planning. So what we did in March was we had an optional side event, which was something that was very closely associated with the work of the Truth and Healing Council. So in this case, we had a site visit and listening session for the interpretive changes at Sutter's Fort State Park, where they're really shifting how they tell the story of what happened at the beginnings of Sacramento, what Sutter's role was in all that, how Native people were mistreated, how all of that kind of happened. In other contexts, it could be something similar where there is, a relevant site, there's a historical society, there is an association that's doing similar work and would like to be highlighted and have visitors and learn about some of the work that they're doing. And that's what we did here. Then on Thursday, from in the morning hours, there is a talking and listening circle, and that's live streamed, but it's also an opportunity for the council, any local or non-local California tribal folks to come in and talk about both. And what we did in the March meeting was split it into a morning piece where we had updates on some of the things that are happening as a result of some of these conversations in the local area. And then we split it into, after a short break, that discussion around what it really means to be a Native person that is part of that legacy and who has survived because of the choices of our predecessors and the things that they chose to do to ensure our survival in the context of modern California. That will change depending, and the conversation will change depending on what the local tribe would like to focus on. And what we focused on in the initial meeting were those early state actions and legislation that were really designed to eliminate tribal people and eliminate tribal ways of life and enslave tribal people. We then had lunch provided, and then in the afternoon, participants were able to access certain primary sources for viewing. And so we had some of the original indenture documents. We had some ledgers from people from different governors. We had letters from people like Sutter that really kind of captured this like real thing happened. And these are the ways that people at the time talked about it. We had then for the council, they were able to take a look at some of the items that need to be repatriated that are within the holdings of state parks. And then on the next day, we had the hearing for the California Truth and Healing Council, where we heard about local initiatives that modern Native people are doing to try to help, and what they're doing in the context of this region. We also heard from one of the local tribes about their history, and really what that hearing looks like will depend on the local tribe and the local Native people and what they would like to highlight in that space, and whether it's, you know, the historical narrative from their perspective, or whether it's something that they're doing to address historical injustice. It's kind of up to those tribes to frame what that looks like. So in future hybrid meetings and hearings, we'll prioritize the local tribes and Native peoples of the region. So for each meeting, we ask tribes a number of questions. So do you have any suggested or proposed speakers to present the story of your tribe or region to the council? And those can be elders, historians, academics, etc. And is your tribe interested in providing an opening blessing or thoughts for either day of the meeting? Would your tribe or representative like to have the opportunity to tell the story of your tribe at a location within the context of the place that we're at? How many individuals will attend? And this is because we are still in this, we're trying to do these meetings as safely as possible, given the overlay of the ongoing pandemic. And so we are trying to make sure that we can do this in a hybrid way, but we do want to prioritize engagement from the local tribal community to make sure that, you know, their presence, their voice is centered in this work. Is there anything about your tribe that you'd like highlighted for the general public? We'll be providing links to tribal cultural centers, businesses, and web presence, and are happy to include any information you'd like to provide. And this is really, we want to be able to highlight the local community and what the tribe is doing in modern times, but also anything that the tribe would like to do as an affiliate or a partner event. We are happy to highlight that as well. Would your tribe or any of your tribal members like to host any affiliate events? Those can include nature walks, dinners, cultural center, open houses, and the like. And would your tribe like to provide any digital content for presentation to the council? And so that would be within the context of the Friday hearing. Is there any primary source material that you'd like to share? Are there any videos that you have that capture the story of your tribe, or any you know, elders that have told the story of your tribe that you'd like to share, or just anything that you have that you think it's important for the public to see? In addition to the quarterly meetings, the council can hold regional hearings throughout the state. And this is really, if there is a topic you'd like to cover, or an issue you'd like to cover, or there's a movement that you would like to cover, or a piece of history, or a person you'd like to cover, the council can come and meet and do a more protracted meeting where it's more of that kind of hearing format where you can highlight what happened in that area. So I'm going to pause very quickly to see if we had any comments or any discussion at this time, and then we'll go into some of the updates. Okay, sorry, I'm just catching up on the chat. Oh, it looks like we have another council member. Any comments, questions, thoughts at this time?
Yes, hello. I have a comment. This is Fred Briones from the Big Valley Rancheria, Band of Pomo Indians, located in Lakeport, California. And I noticed that the governor, he announced the $100 million to tribes. However, that's just an announcement. It's not approved budget anywhere. And it really raises concern now that starting this whole truth and healing group now, it feels very invasive, where the state is just asking for more tribal information. Show us everything you have, tribe. Tell us all your stories, tribe. Tell us everything about you. But when are you giving the tribe any type of compensation? Because I want to make sure that they're not being exploited in this political stunt by Governor Newsom. There is no money for the tribes. There's nothing. But see how you ask the tribes for everything now, to show them everything. The real question to heal is to have the state tell what they have done. Tell us about that gold helmet, that gold shield, that gold spear, those boats out in the bay, that man with the pick. Tell us about those truths. We want to have the state tell everything what they have done to the tribes. Don't put the tribes in this position where they're expected to tell everything. They have for hundreds of years been screaming for help. Murder, murder, please help me. And now how you do? You're not helping them. Let's have the state tell the truth. Please don't put the Indian people up like this to have them tell more.
Thank you. Louise?
Thank you. I reread that article and about Governor Newsom today as well, and understand that it's not a guarantee. And I think you mentioned that yesterday, that we need to contact the legislative body and let them know that it should be approved, and set that money aside. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about. I noticed you, the next slide coming up is the one that you've been asking for a moderator for the status and identity. I know that that was the first time I had heard about that yesterday or the other day when I got the email looking for the moderator. But who's on that subcommittee, and when were individuals chosen, and is there still room for members to participate? And so I think, I'd like to hear a better definition of what that committee is actually doing, because the status and identity makes you feel like you're determining what makes a tribe, who is a tribe. I'm just saying by the name. Okay, that's what it sounds like is happening. And so I guess we need a little bit more information on the responsibility of that committee. And if they are already formed, are they beating up each other? That's why you need a moderator, or what's happening? So, I mean, just more information on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And really on that committee, we're trying to get ahead of them beating up on each other or beating up on a moderator. And so that's why we're looking for someone who can help facilitate those conversations. And Dr. Leal, we are in receipt of your email and we'll get back to you. We just haven't had our check-in yet where we kind of go down all of the things that have come in. And really what that committee is number one, it's got Vice Chairwoman Turner on it so far, but we haven't had anyone from the council who has volunteered also to be on it. And so if there are folks that are interested in helping be leaders in that space, we're happy to propose that you join that subcommittee. And those conversations have not yet started yet because we want to make sure, and we know that that's actually a major priority because people want to have those conversations. We want to make sure that we have someone who can help facilitate a productive space so that it doesn't end up being kind of a focus on, who is, who is a tribe, who isn't a tribe, who is Indian, who isn't an Indian, and really was more focused on what is this like, why can't people assert their identity? Why can't they assert their full birthright as being Native people of this place? And what can the state do to help make up for that within the jurisdiction of the state? The state does have limited jurisdiction, and there are two things that it doesn't do under the law. One thing is that the state does not have the authority, or the state currently, the governor administration does not have the authority to recognize tribes as government entities. That is under the purview of the federal government, and would need, changes to the law, et cetera. The state also is not in the business of and will not be doing anything that would infringe on tribal sovereignty. And so again, this subcommittee will be focused on what can we do to help Native kids get, preferential placement at UCs and CSUs. What can we do so that Native people can access Native places? What can we do so that Native people can access different funding mechanisms and grant programs and the like, as descendants of this awful genocide? So that's what we're looking to do, and why we've asked for kind of an independent facilitator of that is that we all know that people have different perceptions of us depending on where we come from, that we think might be less of an issue if it's someone who is not from the community. So for example, Loretta and I, people will have different expectations of what our mindset is in this space, just because of either who we work for, where we went to school, what tribe we're from, what our status is, and the like. So we just want to make sure that we're creating a space where it feels like it has integrity, but also that there is productive movement and not just anger, but that there's space for anger because people have a right to be angry, but that there's also some productive discussions. And then I'll say also, we'll talk a bit more about as we go back into the update, is we're viewing these subcommittees because we've thought a bit about the input we've received and how to make sure that we're deliverable oriented. And we've thought about these subcommittees as being almost overarching lenses, which is something we've heard from one of our council members, especially in the context of status and identity, that this is something that should be both a focus, but also should be throughout. And we think about that in terms of, the deliverables, the elders, the youth council as well, because all of those need to be able to cross over all of the different focus areas. So the status and identity subcommittee will both be looking at the unique issues of Native people who lack status or have issues in being able to fully assert their identity as Native peoples in this place. But we'll also be taking a look at each of the discrete issue areas to make sure that those are incorporating and accounting for those issues as well. Can you have a raised hand?
Hello?
We can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay, great. So the state has the governor has no way to executive order a tribal state recognized tribe. There's apparently policies and procedures against it. Because I know other states have tribes that are state recognized. And that kind of would up us, because right now as of today, I got a phone call from the USDA asking if we could, there's $25 million at the state level. And I said, where is this money going to? Well, it says California Indian tribes. I go, I don't know if that's a pure definition because that's from the feds. The feds are getting 200 million to all the states. California's getting 25 million. And, I gave a call to some of my people, and, a lot of them would love to be able to get some food on their table. I mean, that's where we're at. We don't have conference centers. We don't have land. We don't have nothing. We have to work in different kind of programs just to do our language. We have to do our own gatherings. So we don't have land. We do our things at parks, that are, owned by the city or county. So when people say, well, if you have a tribal center, we don't have one. We don't have nothing. And, being in the Central Valley, let's just say from Stockton South all the way to the Grapevine, who's our representative here? There's nobody here from the Central Valley on this council. Now, I mean, we have somebody from Northern California representing us. We have a recognized tribe representing us. But, right now I know of 8 tribes that just see this whole, this whole thing as a waste of energy. And just like that gentleman says, you want to know about our history? We got a rich history. But I really think the state should be able to recognize us. I mean, we've been here ever since California became a state. We signed several treaties. So, so there's no process of state recognition at this time for the governor to sign off an executive order.
No, and so other states have actual legislative and legislature approved processes for recognition. And so that's the difference there, is that California does not have that. And the governor does not have the inherent authority to be able to do something like that. So that's, again, one of those things where in the context of these conversations, we think it's important for someone to be able to communicate where those actual lanes are so that people understand what is feasible or what could be feasible depending on changes to law or changes to resourcing or the like. And I would say, I would encourage those tribes that are viewing the governing council as representative to come to some of these meetings, because the governing council is really here just to help steer the ship and make sure that the business is happening. But really all of the council it's community informed. We want to hear from different tribes. We're not forcing tribes to engage in this process, which is why we don't go out and we demand that people tell us what they know and all of that. And really what we have created in this space is a process where we want tribes to be able to tell their stories on their own terms. So if they don't want to engage, we're not asking them to engage, not intending this to be extractive. We're also not going to tell a story of a tribe that is just steeped in genocide. We already have books about that. We've already seen it. We already know about it. We want to know from the tribe what they would like to celebrate or not celebrate about their history, or the truth of something that happened to their tribal members from their perspective. Many of the existing histories that we see are from the perspective of the colonizers and the conquest. And so it dehumanizes the Indian experience. And what we're trying to do is rehumanize Indian people, have people understand that the stories that they tell about the awful things that happened here are not just like stories that you tell over drinks. They're actually people's grandparents, great-grandparents, and people's, family that they're talking about. And so that's really where we're at here. And I would encourage those tribes that aren't engaging to at least, try to let us know how we could better fit your needs. I've gone to meet with several non-federally recognized tribes just to understand how they'd like to engage in this process. And I find that even just having the conversation is a first step. And if they don't want to engage, we don't have to engage any further. But really, this process is meant to be deliverables oriented. And so if there is something that your tribe really needs and really sees as an issue that the state can help with, that's something that can go into this report that is co-authored and signed off on by the governor's office as well. So again, I understand some hesitancy here, but I do encourage tribes that might be hesitant to just think about what could be something that could make a difference for their tribe in the context of this work. Councilmember Giovanetti, I wanted to acknowledge that you joined, and then you also have a raised hand.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to say that in regard to the last couple of comments from people about unacknowledged tribes in California, that maybe, I know we've talked about this before, but maybe it would be helpful to create a thumbnail template, not to belittle any piece of this because it's an extremely important part of our history. I was thinking about the work that was begun by Congressman George Miller of Vallejo, you know, the ACCIP program, and I forget the acronym now, you know, that Congress funded to specifically look at the status of tribes in California between, I think that was like 92 to 95 that they did the work. I attended one of the meetings in Sacramento. And I know that a large body of that work was done by the late Al Logan Slagle, the Chaliki attorney at law from Oklahoma, but he was on the board of directors for California Indian Legal Services. And that was extremely helpful. And of course, that summary is on the UCLA website. And so they had to have done a lot of work with that as well. And I'm thinking, and then there could be a page or two or something, because that's a lengthy report, the ACCIP report. Forgive me for not remembering the acronym, but
and we've got that on the Truth and Healing site too. We've got all of that.
Okay, great. So I was thinking then the transition to the federal acknowledgement project began in 1977 by an act of Congress, you know, and then the reiterations of that, I think of the amendments, I think done in the, you know, late 90s or something, you know, to try to make it a little bit more humane, but that would be worth looking at to just critique, because, you know, the bottlenecks in that whole process were that what tribes realistically had records, you know, minutes of meetings done in the 1890s of unrecognized tribes in California. Nobody kept minutes. And so those are kind of impossible things that have been required. And then maybe we need to incorporate information in that, talking about tribes are, you know, they're almost exclusively a federal responsibility. I mean, I forget the act of Congress or the policy, but, you know,
Indian Commerce Clause.
Yeah, thank you. 1790 and 1834, right? So yeah, so like, but obviously from the discussions, some people in our constituency, you know, our members, you know, our people don't know all that stuff because it's not always readily available. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Kathy, would you like to speak?
Really, Christina. I have thought for some time that it may be the fact that the person being looked at to moderate the identity subcommittee being outside of the issue is the reason there's a problem trying to get someone to do that. Because if you are in a tribe that is non-recognized, or if you are a disenrolled person, or if you are caught in a moratorium of a tribe that has had a moratorium for 10 or 15 years on enrollment, you don't really understand that problem. And I think that some people are wondering how someone who is away from that situation is really going to be able to moderate such a committee, number one. And, you know, I also feel that the state of California in my belief, is somewhat aiding and abetting tribes that are disenrolling their own people by not taking a stand in that situation. And, you know, many tribes that are disenrolling their people are gaming tribes. There's a compact process within the state of California where language could be developed to discourage tribes from disenrolling people as they are today. And I believe if that's not going to happen with the state of California, then the state needs to do something to recognize these Indian people that have no access to education, have no access to housing or programs to help them obtain housing, have no issues receiving health care in some situations, even though everyone that is on the California Indian rolls should have a way of obtaining benefits from Indian health. But in some areas, it's really difficult to do that once you've been disenrolled from a tribe, or if you are not a member of a federally recognized tribe. So I think that California does have avenues in which to address these issues. And I think it's shameful that so many people that have a shared history, a shared background, have shared generational trauma are, you know, left out without ways to improve their lives when we are all the same. I think that until we heal the circle of our people, and California can help and assist in that, we're going to continue to have all of these issues. And I think that California Indians are being disappeared in California today by paper genocide, just as surely as they were erased by murder in the 1800s. So that's my belief. And I'm hoping that we can come to some kind of terms to improve these situations, because we really are disappearing ourselves. And that's a sad fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. So,
Christina, can I comment on that?
sure.
Real quickly, I want to say that any descendant of anyone approved on the 1972 final roll of the California land judgment, any person listed on that and any of their descendants are eligible for basic health care through all the IHS clinics in California. But however, one of the real unfortunate things is that they're not eligible for purchase referred care, which includes quite a few expensive items that the clinics can't do themselves, that they have to refer out to specialists, you know, in their regions. But that's not a panacea. That's just an observation, because it's problematic to say the least.
Thank you, council member. And I think I do just want to put it kind of just in the thought process. I think in an ideal world, we do have someone from the community that understands these issues, that can kind of navigate them really well and can figure out a good path forward in a way that makes sense and that will work for everybody. But I do want to mention that we've heard in other contexts of people wanting to be in a facilitation role and having, because of the optics of what tribe they're affiliated with or where they're from, there being real issues with the perceived validity of the process, and also the perceived outcomes that people are driving for, and what will be a part of the outcome narrative because of where people are from. And so we're just trying to balance kind of all of it. And I think if there were someone from the community that, you know, we got some good feedback that this could be someone who could really help move this forward, that would not be someone we would turn away. We just want to be mindful of the fact that we don't want to, in creating that process, create a mechanism that from is our in a weird place because people have either intertribal or personal dynamics that are at play there. And then just for thought for this group, I'd like to encourage you all to think about the state in a long-term way, where this state right now is probably the most favorable towards tribes as it has ever been, and the most deferential to tribal sovereignty and to the status, history, everything that has to be, that comes from being Native and is trying to make space and trying to make right. But as you all know, that has never been the case before, and it's not guaranteed in the future, even if you change laws to force outcomes. And so anything that gets proposed where the state has some sort of power over tribes, tribal people, I just encourage you to think a bit about what does that look like if you have a different kind of administration that is not tribal friendly, and whether it would be okay, flip side, to have that kind of authority exerted over your people and your rights. We have lots of raised hands, so I'm sorry if I said something off. Councilmember Giovanetti.
Yeah, I wanted to say part of the background, we're kind of, captives of the history to an extent, but I think about like volume 8 of the Handbook of North American Indians. I believe it was edited by, doesn't matter, the Smithsonian series. But volume 8, they talk about there are originally 300 groups that they know of, 300 tribes or 300 groups in California. And that today we're in a situation of, what is it, like 118 or something, federally recognized. And, I don't know, 40 to 60 petitioning groups. Haven't counted it for a long time, but, that still leaves another 150 groups unaccounted for, right? How pitiful our history is. And just a thought on the struggle that has been so real for the ancestors, for the population of the California tribes to get down to 20,000 by 1890, how from, 600,000 or upwards to 1 million, maybe. It's hard to fathom. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. I'm not quite sure who was first, so I'll call on Ken.
Ken, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm listening to all this, and California is the 6th richest, largest income in the world, and as unrecognized tribes, we need a definition of who we are. I mean, when I fill out the federal census, I tell them who I am. I know it's going nowhere. There's nothing allocated for us from the state. I think every other grouping has allocations. We don't. We're pretty much non-represented at any state level. We don't have no kind of forum to agree on. These things need to be brought up. This is 2022, and I've been at this for almost 20 years, looking at Roth reports, looking at everything I could read, how the whole system of service tribes were created, which are now called recognized tribes. Talked to George Miller's office. We were on an assembly bill to be recognized. Issues happen. We have our history. We could go for a federal recognition, but that's a very expensive process. You're looking upwards to $20 to $25 million because everything has to be signed off, and you got to create duplicates, triplicates. we have a very rich history, and the tribes around us are very the same, the same thing. They're situated. Cajon got recognized, Brain got recognized. And I'm sitting there going, well, really, it wasn't the feds who did it to us, the federal government. It was the state of California. They're the ones who created the genocide. The federal government just sat back and was complacent. We're not going to get into this. You guys do what you want. And, being in the Central Valley, what is there, 6 recognized tribes here? This is a huge landmass. There's none on the coast that are recognized. So when I hear that the governor can't do nothing, but it's like, okay, there's laws against it, but how do we change those laws, to make it feasible? What are we going to benefit from this whole healing process? Telling our stories? What's down the road for us? I mean, we can create a nonprofit and become sort of fiduciary responsibility, but then that doesn't distinguish us from anybody else. We are California Indians. We've been here for thousands of years, and I'm sitting here just listening to it. We don't have that federal status. At one time we did, but now we don't. And there should be a process for state recognition. This may not be the venue, but, I was hoping and praying that something would come out of this since day one when I started talking about state recognition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And I would encourage you to think about what that looks like in that context of, because I think what it is too, is you've raised some very good points. So why are there no tribes on the coast? Why are the coastal tribes all not recognized? And what is this history here that most people, I don't think, know about? And so I would encourage you to utilize this process to daylight some of these truths that I don't think a lot of people understand. And I don't think a lot of people understand happens when you have, an Indian Gaming Regulatory Act passed that has certain things happen. I don't think people understand what happens when you have a process that's inherently political for recognition. And so I think all of those things are things that are important to highlight as like real life modern day barriers that non-federally recognized tribes are seeing. And what does it look like to have, a process that makes you jump through all of these hoops and have a lot of things, again, be politically motivated. So I would encourage you to think about how this process could be utilized to help bring light to some of those issues that I think are probably things that you've talked about your entire life and your entire career, but I think are not intuitive to a lot of people in California. I don't think people are in San Francisco thinking, why are there no tribes here? I think it's just not on people's not in people's awareness. And we hope that part of this process will help people understand some of those modern challenges. Councilmember Giovanetti, are you still raising your hand? Are you?
I'm sorry, I forgot to take my hand down.
Okay. Louise, would you like to?
Hi again. I was thinking a lot about what Ken was saying as well. But I think that together we can address these and present them. I mean, you're given an authority to come to the people, and you've brought yourself with this committee. And even if you're telling us that you can't do it, the governor can't do it, well, we can still ask. And you're here and you have his ear, and you can work with us to present that information to him, or to if we need to do it to the legislature, but we need to do it together. And you're bringing us together. So let's do it. I mean, if they throw us out, they throw us out. We've been thrown out before. We've been fighting all our lives. I mean, God, since I was little, I was told not to say I was Indian because they're going to take us away to boarding school. I mean, you know what? We've been fighting forever. So you've given this committee or gives us a chance to do that. Allow us to do it. I mean, let us step up. Like I said, if they throw us out, so what? I've been thrown out of a lot of places. And it's like, hey, come on, we need to do this for the ancestors too. I think that this is why it's all coming up. We have these very strong feelings, and work with us. I mean, come on, Loretta, you too, you got knowledge there. We can present this information and let it come from this committee or this process. It can come from this process.
Thank you, Louise. And I want to clarify, I'm not telling people you can't do things because I'm saying you can't think about them in the context of this. I'm trying to tell you where the limitations are so you can ask about how to change those limitations. So what we're hoping through the process of the status and identity subcommittee is to have those, what are those things that need to get done through this process that are recommendations that can help address some of the issues that people are seeing because of this history. Ken, did you have another comment?
No, I just want to thank her for clearing my mind, because I just needed to know if the governor had that authority. I've never seen it anywhere. I've gone through the charters and everything, and I've never seen it where he cannot recognize a tribal government. I got the law books from Indian law. I've gone through, I cannot find any definition to where he cannot support or make a general or an executive order to where he can not do it. I mean, there's maybe stuff I don't know because I'm not a lawyer, but I agree with, Louise, that if our history's told, like my history, her history, the state's going to have to look at it in a way that's concise, because we are tribes. We got tribal lands, boarding school records, we got outside reservation schools built for us. We have all this, but the federal process is so expensive. And if you're not on top of it, you don't get another chance at all. Once you're out, you're out. You're put in a black hole and you're never seen again. I know several tribes that have tried it, attempted it, and they're off the list now. They have to resubmit. And we're not a new tribe like the BIA says, our federal acknowledgement process. We're a historical tribe. So I think if California saw what what was done to my tribe and many more, my sister tribes around us, because, just in my one area, there's 6 unrecognized tribes, and we're all in the same place, going to Indian House Services, because we have the 72 judgment, or we have allotment lands, we're heirs to allotment lands. Even the Cobell case, that should be brought up too, because in my area, there's over 41 allotment lands that I have documented. And that's not including the Indian homesteads from the 1860s. So they recognize us as Indian people from an Indian tribe. And we have a tribal number. It's just, who do we talk to? We need some sort of representation at the state level to push our agenda. I guess this would be our agenda to get federal funding to the state of California for services for us, instead of us using other state services. Because it's very hard, because if you go to Indian House Services or TANF, just like that gentleman says, you're a tribal member, you get better service. If you're not, if you're just a 72 judgment or an allotment landowner, you get the second-class citizen service. I know that for sure, because my aunt's been through it, my uncles. So, right now my nephew's going through it. So it's very hard. But thank you for your time. Thank you, Louise. You brought me back to reality. There's certain things that a governor and governor can do, and they don't know our stories. And that's basically what they're asking for, is our our history, our genocide. And anyway, thank you. Sorry for getting a little upset.
No, I mean, we want there to be space for these conversations. And I think you've made a good point too, that I don't know that the federal government totally understands how things have played out here. And again, even federally recognized tribes get almost zero federal funding on balance. And it's because of different allocations, different funding formulas. And so the history here is a history of complicity between the state and the federal government that I think it's helpful for the state to have that picture, to be able to work with the federal government to figure out how to address these ongoing systemic issues that we continue to see because of that history, because of termination, because of the mess that is California Indian history. Before Councilmember Giovanetti, you speak, I did want to address something in the chat about the state recognition. And so there are actually a couple of tribes that have documents that are basically joint resolutions that say that they are recognized by the state as the ancestral tribe in a certain area. Joint resolutions by nature are the will of the legislature or the opinion of the legislature on something that may not be under their purview, that they forward basically to the federal government for their consideration and encouragement to act on. So while they are, they're official documents, they don't have the force of law. And so it's not it's not an actual process that has gone through the whole, it ostensibly, and I don't know what, this would have to go through probably ledge council, who are the lawyers for the legislature. They could potentially recognize a tribe if they, did a statute and it was compliant with the Constitution and the parameters around what they're able to do. California has pretty complex and aggressive equal protection types of laws too under the Constitution. So it's very complicated, and Loretta and I are not in a position to be able to speak on it completely definitively, but there is likely an avenue with the legislature, but it's not a joint resolution. Councilmember Giovanetti.
I'm trying to get, okay, all right, I had it turned off, I had it muted. Yeah, I want to say that I think around 1993 or 92, Congressman Miller had a hearing in Washington, one of the Interior Committees, and I got to testify for my group that I was enrolled in at the time that was not federally recognized, but from California, from Northern California. And there were at least 4 or 5 other tribal leaders from California tribes that are unrecognized, and I believe they're all women. I can't remember the tribes now. I have pictures of all of us together. And then I believe the overview was given before individual tribal leaders spoke, was given by Slagle, the historical overview of what they're asking. They're asking the Interior, maybe the Insular Affairs Committee, to consider these tribes that are not recognized in California. And there were 4 or 5 of us testifying that day. And we all distributed our talks, and they were principally kind of historical talks about the wrongs, the genocide, the struggle to maintain community identity and cohesiveness, and the struggle. And but it's almost like feed of trust struggles that tribes go through today. If they have a piece of land or 50 pieces of land they would like to see recognized tribes that they want to see put in a trust, it just seems like, it used to be an automatic 30 years ago. You just paid the 50 cents and mail the letter into the Bureau, and they would stamp it and approve it. But now it's like, almost takes an act of Congress. It's so cumbersome. So it didn't get very far. It kind of felt good, like, well, maybe they noticed us, but it was, I think that one gentleman's comments were really good a minute ago. It's just like, it just takes so much effort and so many resources seemingly to marshal up anything to get their attention back there, that I know that it's just a really tough maze to penetrate. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. So I have a couple more updates that I'll go through very quickly. And I don't think I need to share my screen for these. I just want to make sure we get through some of the updates. But the Academic Partnerships Subcommittee, so we have a number of subcommittees, and we have the Academic Partnerships Subcommittee, which is focused on partnering with academic institutions to do work that's aligned with the council. And so whether that is having fellowships where they're helping with research, having partnerships where there's a law clinic that is helping people compile their stories of their tribe, whether it is having a law clinic that's helping non-federally recognized tribes figure out how to create mechanisms to take on land or conserved land as a native land conservancy or a consortium. Those are the types of things that the Academic Partnerships Subcommittee works on. And then they're also pulling together a group of academics that are Native academics or Native focused academics to see if there's any interest in doing scholarship that's related to this work. We've also got a funding partnership subcommittee that works, is part of the oversight for the California Truth and Healing Fund, who will be announcing a new opportunity in the near term. That opportunity will be available to federally recognized tribes and nonprofits. There's some legal mechanisms around the ability to get to non-federally recognized tribes that are not organized in a way that they can receive that funding, but we are hoping to work with partner granting organizations and nonprofits to help those tribes still access those funds as direct recipients. And again, those awards, as I understand them, and those opportunities, as I understand them, will be basically applying to the fund to be able to administer programs that are related to this work. So as dictated by whatever funding opportunity. So if you are a native funder and you'd like to be able to, seed some of the research or oral history work or any of the partnerships that are within your area, that could be an acceptable use. Or if you're a tribe that just wants to fund elders being able to come to these meetings, that could be another thing. The Youth Council had a virtual convening in January, and we're looking at a second virtual convening in the next couple of months, where we'll bring them back together and we'll kind of think about what we talked about in January, which was basically youth telling their stories as California Native people and thinking about what their footprint is within the context of their ancestors and what's to come. The Status and Identity group, as I mentioned, is that group that will be thinking through what are those number one, what are the outstanding issues, but then also what are the things that the state can do to help assist with that. So if it is something where the state needs to be advocating to the federal government for certain things, that would come out of that process. It will also be responsible for taking a look at all of the overarching pieces of the issue area work and making sure that they account for Native people who and non-federally recognized tribes who are not able to regularly access things that are intended to help Native people. So for example, if you are not enrolled in a tribe because of something that the tribe did, or if you are not enrolled in a tribe because membership criteria has certain blood quantum, that is something that we want to hear about. How can we make this whole without, offending principles of tribal sovereignty and self-determination? Then the education subcommittee, we're actually looking to actually potentially pivot that into a task force because we think that it has more kind of issue area and more of a direct lens of things that actually need to be done. And so both an examination of the gaps in education for California Native people and also throughout history where we see, there's legislation that says that California Native kids can't go to school unless they have a white caretaker or something. There's things that are similar like that. But then also looking, at the status of education systems like the boarding schools, and then also looking at how we talk about and learn about Native people within the context of California education systems. And Robert, did you want to say anything? We didn't hear from you really that much yesterday, but I want to make sure if you wanted to talk, you had a minute.
Sure, if you give me a minute. Hello, everybody. I put my name in the chat, so that's who I am. I likely get to be on a subcommittee, I believe. But again, coming with what we'll discuss today in terms of identity, tracing the history of California Indians, the need that the education committee, I think, would feel would become letting the general population of California know who we are and what our horrific history has been. What Kenneth and Louise were talking about, if non-Indians knew what we went through within the given areas, especially Bakersfield, and going through the public school systems, I believe they would be sympathetic to what we would want to accomplish in terms of gaining equal rights and more civil rights. So again, that's our purview in our subcommittee, and also with Assembly Bill 1703 now, more California Indian history in the public schools. As far as I know, we've passed through the Assembly and now going on to the Senate and another committee. So hopefully we'll get that through. And then again, there will be a lot more California Indian history for the general public to know. But again, if anybody has any concerns about education, especially maybe bullying in the schools or what may be going on within the local area, I guess you can please contact me or the other person who's in charge of the committee, and that would be Christina.
A couple more. So we'll pull up our notes, and I think contact Robert first.
Okay.
And then
All right, I'll put my email in the chat too. And I'm also the brand new, a month and a half old California Indian elder and residents at California State University, San Bernardino. So I've been busy down there getting the university in contact with the local reservations and also the urban areas, the Title VI schools specifically in Banning and San Bernardino City, and now looking into Palm Springs. So let's see, anything else is there? Not that I can think of now, but again, any educational issues, I'll put my email in the chat. So thank you, guys.
thank you, Robert. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And then finally, we have the Elders Subcommittee, and we've got Councilmember Harper on from that. And really, they're looking for additional elders. And we actually do have some folks on here that we will be proposing to the subcommittee with bios and just, asking if they're interested, and we'll kind of do that whole process. If you know of any other elders from your community that you think would be a good fit, really the Elders Subcommittee thinks about what are some of the things from a high level that should be done with this process, what are some lessons learned, what are some things we need to be aware of. And so it really is also kind of an advisory council as well to kind of help course correct where that's needed. So if there are people who have been doing this work long term and can help advise that process and help kind of make sure that we're not going down avenues that everybody's already tried and has failed at, or if they failed, it's because it was the wrong timing, but now might be the right time. That's what we're really looking for. And then again, as I mentioned, we're seeking to conduct those oral histories. So as I mentioned, if you have oral histories that are ready to go, we just also want to see that there's consent. And so consent by the tribe that holds it, or consent by the people who have submitted those oral histories to be a part of this process, or their families if they're no longer with us. And it can also be conditional consent, because we want to just make sure that people are engaging in the way that they feel is best. Finally, and I'll get Ken, I see you have a raised hand, and I don't want to cut off any good discussion if people have thoughts, that we are a little over time. As I mentioned earlier, we are proposing that the council move forward with focused task forces, and we had thought about a general overarching advisory body that has a bunch of different kind of advisors on it, but then about more of a task force structure that looks a little bit like what they did with Tribal Law and Order Act, where they brought in people who were the issue area experts from their fields to lead each initiative, and then also build out those really, systems changing, cross-cutting changes for policy, legislation, authority, all of the like. And then, so just these are proposed areas that are not intended to be like firm. They're just kind of what we've heard throughout the almost 3 years of consultation and engagement we've had with tribes. And we're thinking of kind of a bucket that looks at culture, so language, cultural expression, things like that. Financial survivance, which is more about economic development, but we're trying to focus more on a less like colonial commercial construct and look more at what does it mean to thrive in this modern day society, whether it's you can engage yourself as a business person and have access to financial products, or whether it's you as a tribe are trying to build out a self-sustained economy. Education, which we are proposing to pull into the task force structure. Wellness, which would be kind of overarching behavioral health, human health, and services and the like. Land and lifeways, which we know are kind of inextricable. So when we talk about land back, we're also talking about bringing back lifeways, access, sacred practices, and sacred species. And then, you know, kind of a bucket for public safety where we're looking at court systems, PL 280, gaps in criminal justice, but also not even thinking about it as criminal justice, but kind of getting people to be more well. And as buckets, we know actually kind of the same thing. So how do we communicate that in a final report that is able to translate to people who are not used to seeing all of those things in the same space? So that was a lot of information. I'll post this presentation onto the website as well so that people can take some time to read through it, and we have some follow-up questions. But at this time, I will turn it over to Ken, since you have your raised hand.
Well, yes, you did cover a lot. I was just wondering, since Ramos was pushing so many bills for natives, would we go through legislation to create some sort of charter for state recognized tribes? I mean, all I could do is ask, you know, since I guess Robert is real close ties with him. I don't know if legislation would be the correct way. Like you said, is it, you know, more than likely, California must treat every California the same. There's no difference between a California Indian and a new California person. So I'm just going, I guess the criteria, you just covered so much. You got me stuck on Public Law 280. I'm sorry, but thank you for listening. I just want to know if Ramos would be approachable for this idea of state recognition. Thank you.
That could be possible. I would say the legislature is probably the starting point for anything that would require changes to the law. And then everybody gets stuck on PL 280, so you're not alone. It's probably the most confusing thing in the world. And so, and something that is really in need of some attention. And so that, and again, that's one of those issues that is, again, like a federal state problem where there's gaps, and that the federal government also has complicity and accountability for. And so I imagine that a lot of the pieces here are going to be collaborative recommendations where here's what the state can do, but in order to fully realize the potential of this council, the federal government has to be on board as well. So for example, when we talk about, you know, land issues, access, the largest landowner in the state of California or landholder of lands is the federal government. So the state can only do so much to get there, but we also need that partnership in order to make sure that that's not a fractionated approach that doesn't actually solve any issues because what's happening is in a different place. So that's a lot of information, as I mentioned. This is recorded, so you can come back and listen to it as well. Really, as this moves forward, we do want for these task forces and then also the subcommittees to be pointing out what are those issues and then trying to think about, well, who is a part of the solution, because it could be a combination of state, federal, and private. You know, if you have someone who has been benefiting from being in Washoe territory since the 1970s, for example, and there hasn't been a lot of access and there's been actual exclusion, what does that look like? And how can the state and the federal government and private actors work together to be a bit more seamless in the approach.
Christina, this is Fred Briones. I'm sorry to cut you off, but really quick, you mentioned there's going to be a funding opportunity. Could you explain just one more time, just a little bit elaborate, like time, date, how much, or?
Sure. So I don't have the specific details, but it will be announced in the next few weeks. So we'll make sure that this goes out to the mailing list as well. And that opportunity will be funding that's available for Native nonprofits. So like if there's a nonprofit that facilitates a grant fund, for example, or if there's a nonprofit that is the mechanism for a non-federally recognized tribe to be able to engage with some of these funding opportunities, those will be eligible entities as far as I understand, and also federally recognized tribes. For those tribes that are not nonprofits, we're hoping to have a partner that will help facilitate funding to those tribes directly, just because there's some limitations in how the bigger fund is able to do that. But that should be in the next few weeks.
Grant, I'm sorry, how large the grant will be?
I believe the funding availability is around 500,000 for this year.
How many grantees do you know?
I think it will depend on how many applicants there are. And I think it'll probably also be tied to, the populations that are anticipated to be served. But the priority is to California Native communities and individuals. But again, as I mentioned, those programs will be dependent on what the applications are, without with some limitations that it has to be sort of related, I think, to the work, but without really totally dictating what that looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just one more item for the board and the subcommittees. We have been discussing all these topics for years and years, my grandma, my parents, of just the lack of help towards the state. So I really hope this board does something. And I wanted just to go back and ask the governor, tell the governor the hard questions, because you're asking us our history, everything. But have the governor, have the state start telling things like, who are the bounty hunters that hunted us all down in the Central Valley and got so rich? How much gold? Go back to the original treaty that was broken. Please don't shift all of this on the tribes to tell all our things. We want the state to start telling the truth of what they done, of all the murder. Let's open up a cold case. You see it on TV all the time. We can make a movie out of this tribe, board, state, of all the murdered indigenous people. Let's open up the cold case and get back all the gold. That should be the goal of this program, to heal, to give back to everybody, not to exploit and write a book about them so hopefully someone will feel sorry for them. No, enough of that. Don't turn us into professional beggars, please. We want to be about business and get land back, gold back, recognition back, and the spirits back. Give it all back. It's that time now. Don't hold back now, because the state hasn't really done anything for tribes, but just take from tribes. They haven't done nothing. They hold this meeting, but I hope it's not just full of hot air, $100 million full of hot air like that. Let's be very, very concrete and make objectives and life change for these people in California. I hope you could do that. There's going to be a lot of pressure on you to tell the truth and to make us heal. Show us what you could do. Prove it now with all that education and that great big board now. Let's see. You've worked so long with tribal communities, and you see, I'm sorry to say, there's so much disconnect in the state. So make something happen. We're all watching you now, board. And you too, Christina, with your job, $161,000 to serve tribal communities at a federal, state level like this. Oh, wow. Look at all those poor Indian people out there. we're really watching you to make a move, to make something happen for us.
Fred, I appreciate your comments, but I really wish that you would not make this personal. We're all Native here and we're all experiencing the same trauma and having to work in systems that are not built for us, and that we receive this same trauma every day working in systems with people who don't look like us and who don't value our opinions or our thoughts or anything that has to do with us. And so I really wish if you come to these meetings that you come here with the idea that you want to help heal and that you want to help this process. And if you're not wanting to do that, I wish that you would just watch and wait and stop putting shame on Native people who are trying to do the right thing. And I just really wish that you could come here with that healing mindset so that we are all able to do our jobs every single day in the face of racism, injustice, inequity, and this long-term historical trauma that we carry every single day in an office of people who don't look like us. So that's all I want to say here is that I encourage everyone here to continue with this process, but understand that we're having to process this ourselves on a daily basis without the support of the community and without the support of anybody else. We only have each other in this space, and I would hope that all of you are here to do that as well.
Christina, I'd like to add a comment too. I think that it's important for us in this space not to project upon each other aspects of what Native American psychologists and social workers, PhDs and doctors of social work have characterized as internalized oppression. And because at some level, internalized oppression, you know, it's the energy that we could put out to each other that is indicative of the internal turmoil or the grief or the pain we live with as persons who've been militarily conquered and then surrounded, continual reminders of everything horrible that ever happened. And so it tears apart the fabric of our community to project upon each other ill will or, you know, possible, questionable intent of why are we in the professions that we're in. You know, it seems like suffice it to say that nobody would be involved in this if we didn't feel like we could bring truth, you know, and the truth is, even just the raw truth is somewhat healing to this because people have run from the truth forever about what happened to California Indians, you know, all the way up to the present. So I just want to say that we need to be careful. You know, I'm not pointing my finger at any one person. We all could follow that advice more carefully and be careful about finger pointing and remember that, you know, we're representing our communities, our families, our ancestors, and that we need to reflect that respect and that caring. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. And I just encourage all of you with the 100 million that has been proposed by the governor. Again, that is something that we fully intend to have be a set aside, and it will only not be there if there are people from the community who say that it shouldn't be there. And so that's what we're really seeking, is that support. And it's really on the legislature to validate that and make sure that it's there or not. The governor isn't going out and announcing something that he doesn't intend to do. So I do encourage you, if you want that to happen, to please support it. Louise, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I can agree that it's hard for Native people working with the state. My granddaughter works at the California State Lands Commission. And there have been times I wanted to call you and say, can you go by and say hi? Because she works in an office that is so prejudiced. And it's just so hard on her identifying as a Native person. And so it's like, it still exists. It's still there. And I see that, you know, when she calls me and it's hard on her. And it's like, just stick it out, girl. Apply other places, but it's hard. So I believe that, that it is still hard, for us out there in public, in the public view. So I just wanted to say I agree with you there that I still the way she calls me, I want to go over there and yell at him, but it's like, okay, stay away, grandma, don't come. But
Louise, can I respond to that?
excuse me?
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
I wanted to say that I was recently talking to a relative, a native relative, because I have Italian relatives as well. But one of my native relatives was working for a federal agency and ran into some racism and bullying on the job by a supervisor. And, sometimes all we have is Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, federal laws to protect us, but it's a start to get the wolves off our back when somebody's decided to be racist and hateful to a Native person. And, if a person does file a complaint, they have the EEOC has up to a year to send an attorney to investigate the matter. And so, I don't know if it's the first thing that everybody should do, but it's certainly there and it's still provided within federal law. And of course, they come up with their findings, they won't sue anybody, but if she would really ran into egregious behavior, she could potentially bring a suit to stop some horrible abuse that she's run into on the job there. It's a thought, she would have possibly an avenue through state court or through federal court, whichever would be the most advantageous to her. But unfortunately, people have to hire their own attorneys when they get that far into the spigot with a matter like that. And so maybe that'll help. I don't mean to make it sound like it's easy or something.
Yeah, well, she did file something which just made it worse. And but I told her join the union, be a job steward. I was a job steward for 20 years, so go ahead. I've tried it.
I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
Join fighters. Yes.
That's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you both. And Louise, if you ever want, we can go swing by and say hi and just have a visit and see how we can help, because we're always trying to support each other within state service. So we have gone a bit over, and I really do appreciate you all joining us here tonight. I do again want to make sure that we're keeping a nice and healing and open space to be able to work through these issues. So really encourage you to continue to come back. One more thing is that as we are doing a bit more travel, I am open to coming down and hosting in-person listening sessions so that we can just visit and talk and think about how we can do more. So please let me know if that's something that you'd like to do. If there is a tribe or an organization that is doing regular meetings, I'm happy to jump in and kind of have those conversations. So very much appreciate all of you joining again and staying so much past the time we were supposed to end, and hope to see you all soon. Take care.
Stu.